Hello, my name is John Desnoyers-Stewart, and I'll be presenting today on being in virtual worlds, how an interaction, environment, and touch shape embodiment in immersive experiences. We extend our bodies every day through many different means, through tools, through the clothing we wear, and across the internet. Virtual reality extends our bodies in new ways, allowing us to embody avatars and enter into virtual worlds. However, it does all of this through the same body. However, virtual embodiment research focuses on body ownership over an anthropomorphic avatar. It tends to focus on the image and whether or not we feel like that image is ours. This is a very limited view of embodiment that misses many of the important aspects of embodiment, including the physical body that frames that experience, the importance of the virtual environment to the experience of embodiment, and the awareness of the physical environment that goes beyond the virtual experience. So in order to expand our understanding of virtual embodiment, in this paper I asked, what does it truly mean to be embodied in virtual worlds? We'll begin with embodiment as being in the world, grounded in the theories of Heidegger, Dourish, and others. We'll continue by inverting those theories, specifically embodied interaction, into virtual reality to understand how we become embodied in virtual worlds. We'll then talk about how attention shapes the body. We'll talk about the vital role of touch. Finally, we'll conclude with the holistic design framework for virtual embodiment that we constructed based on the diverse theories that are brought together here. So beginning with embodiment as being in the world. Heidegger's concept of being in the world, or Dasein, the essence of this concept is we cannot be without being in. In other words, embodiment is a relationship between body and environment. As Bernhard claims, all bodies, not just human ones, come to matter through the world's iterative intra-activity. Rather than looking at it from a first-person point of view, we can look at it externally. What does it mean for a rock, for example, to be embodied? Of course, the rock cannot exist in isolation. It cannot be without being in. The rock comes to matter through its capacity to act upon and be acted upon. For example, the rock can redirect a river, and reciprocally, the rocks can be acted upon by the river. Dourish gives the example of buying a book online. The computer is embodied through its capacity to reach out and bring a book to us. Now, from a second point of view, we have this concept of having a body. The experience of having a body is complex, but the two fundamental aspects are the schema and the image. The body schema is essentially the ground that shapes every single perception that we have. We don't perceive the schema directly, we perceive through it. Now, on the other hand, the image is the figure that we perceive when we reflectively think about our own bodies. Now, importantly, our body can be changed through many different tools and techniques, as the body schema and image can both be extended and altered. For example, our body schema can extend to adapt to different tools, like a bicycle. We don't think about turning the wheel, but rather extend our bodies, feeling the road through the bike. On the other hand, our body image can be altered, and this can change our behavior. For example, a lab coat can alter participants' behavior depending on whether it's referred to as a painter's coat or a doctor's coat. A familiar concept in human-computer interaction are affordances. So we can think about affordances as our body's capacity shaping our perceptions. In effect, a sort of shadow of our body schema that has been projected onto the world around us. We don't see our body schema directly, but rather we perceive it through those affordances that we recognize in the world. Now, if we take these concepts and invert them and bring them into virtual worlds, we can understand virtual embodiment. In essence, if we take Dourish's concept of how a computer becomes embodied in the physical world through its capacity to act upon that physical world, we become embodied in virtual worlds through our capacity to act upon them. Importantly, virtual embodiment relies on the very same fundamental processes as embodiment in physical reality. This means that virtual embodiment, however, can never be the same as in physical reality, because it's always contextualized by that body. As a result, virtual and physical split as we interpret another body through our own. The next key concept in being in virtual worlds is how the directing of attention dynamically shapes our virtual bodies. In essence, we direct our attention inward and outward, and there's many different concepts to describe this act. We talk about tools as being ready to hand or present at hand. or media as being transparent or opaque, or sensations being body-directed or object-directed. We talk about ground and figure, body schema and body image. And all of these are just different ways of saying attention that is directed proximally towards the body or distally away from the body. I give Merleau-Ponty's example of extending our body through a car, where we don't drive by directly perceiving the road. We have to engage with it through a series of different couplings. So in order to perceive the road and interact with it, we have to expand ourselves through the steering wheel, through the car, through the tires, which are all experienced transparently, allowing us to feel the grip of the tires on the road. And this can be directed in an instant. For example, a distraction such as an itch might bring our attention back to our hand. What this also means is that we can experience the world through a spectrum of embodiment. If we think of embodiment in this way, then we can open up a much broader understanding and a much broader capacity to have embodied experiences in virtual environments that recognize that we don't always want to be directly represented by an avatar. Finally, the last key theory that we need to cover to understand virtual embodiment is the centrality of touch as the foundation of multisensory embodiment. The concept of embodiment as this interaction between ourselves and other relies heavily on touch, as touch forms the boundary between self and other. Everything that I touch is other, and everything that is touched is me. This duality of touch allows us to experience embodiment. Building on all of these elements, we constructed a holistic design framework for virtual embodiment grounded in interaction. And that framework consists of these 4 different themes: that relational embodiment in interaction, to have a body requires being a body. Affordances reveal the intersection of body, environment, and action. Virtual embodiment is a spectrum rooted in the physical body, and attention and multisensory integration transform embodiment. First, this concept of relational embodiment in interaction, to have a body requires being a body. Based on this concept, we should be encouraging embodiment using two-way interaction. This is something that's sorely missing in most virtual reality experiences, where we often cannot interact with the world in any way, but if we can, it's often a one-way interaction. In order to encourage a richer sense of embodiment, we need virtual worlds that actually have consequences that can act upon us. And secondly, we should be evoking presence via embodiment and embodiment via presence. Since these are two sides of the same coin, any experience of presence will deepen our sense of embodiment and vice versa. Second, affordances reveal the intersection of body, environment, and action. The concept here is that we must consider how the design of the virtual worlds that we enter shape our perception of our bodies and how we can interact with that world. Therefore, we can alter bodily perception through the environment. We need to use internally coherent affordances to communicate the unique relationship between body and environment. Because our relationship in virtual worlds are different than in the physical world, we need to communicate that to the immersant. We need to measure embodiment through action at the interface between body and environment. Third, virtual embodiment is a spectrum rooted in the physical body. We need to acknowledge that every experience in virtual reality is shaped by a physical body. We should design for the impermanence of virtual bodies. Avatars are perhaps more like putting on and taking off clothes, and we might gain some sense of ownership over them, but it will never be to the same level as our physical body. We need to recognize the significance of virtual lucidity. So that is the fact that we are aware that we're having an experience that is, in essence, not physically real. And fourth, attention and multisensory integration transform embodiment. Touch is vital and yet missing, and therefore we need to integrate touch where possible. We need to acknowledge the absence of touch. We need to integrate affordances that suggest that maybe we can't touch the table that's sitting in front of us in a virtual world. We can draw attention towards aligned bodily sensations, and we can exploit sensory conflict through pseudohaptics, facilitating experiences of subtle virtual tactility through, for example, changing the color of an object to make it feel warmer. All of this really is to say that embodiment is fundamentally interactional. Embodiment is not about body ownership over an avatar, but it is the interaction between ourselves and the world around us. And that is how we can continue to become more embodied, by being in virtual worlds. Thank you.